The monkey business illusion. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball. The correct answer is 16 passes. Did you spot the gorilla?
How many saw the curtain change colors? It went from red to gold. How about did you notice the player wearing black leaving the game? You saw that? You see the gorilla, the curtain, and the.
You see the curtain.
Okay, so I haven't seen anyone who's gotten all of these, right? It's really, really hard. How about the moonwalking bear? Trick question, there was no moonwalking bear. That's a different video. But the gorilla is something else, right? So, if we roll that video a little bit more, it does a little bit of the.
For people who haven't seen or heard about a video like this before, about half missed the gorilla. If you knew about the gorilla, you probably saw it. But did you notice the curtain changing color or the player on the black team leaving the game? Let's rewind and watch it again. Here comes the gorilla, and there goes a player, and the curtain is changing from red to gold.
Oh, there's the moonwalking bear.
There it is, right there.
When you're looking for a gorilla, you often miss other unexpected events.
All right, so what I'm trying to illustrate with this is just how hard it is to attend to more than one thing at a time. Right, so you can't multitask. I try to teach my students this. You think you're special? Not even you can multitask. I really, really mean you too. Right, one of the things I try to tell my students is you're normal, and that's a good thing. It's good to be normal. What that means is you're not that special. You're not as special as you think you are. And one student said he was actually at a doctor's office, getting a diagnosis, and the doctor said, well, this could be some pretty minor thing, or it could be cancer. And he started to panic, and then he realized, wait a second, I'm not special. So it's okay. But it turned out he didn't have cancer. So I didn't understand that the lag in attention was so great that once you're focused on something, you get distracted. Getting back in takes a long time. That seemed a little long to me, but maybe it takes that much time to really get back into the flow of it. So. The New York Times, I haven't seen this very much before. The New York Times actually commissioned an experiment where they randomly assigned their subjects to actually have a multitasking situation or a monotasking situation, and found that when they did cognitive testing on them, that those in the multitask performed about 20% worse. Now, some of you have backgrounds in cognitive psychology, social psychology, neuroscience, and know a lot more about this than I do. I just kind of dabble in this area, but I think it's super interesting. And my thought is, if my students know this, maybe it will change their behavior. I'm also a behavioral scientist, and so I understand that that's not as easy as I think. So, but the point is, everybody suffers from this, these experiments have been replicated many times with roughly the same result. Intentional blindness is a big problem, and something we can't overcome without real, careful self-programming. And just as an example, some of you know my colleague Jeremy Pope in political science, who's one of our best teachers. Right? He's just a terrific teacher, super engaging person. Spends a lot of time thinking about how to make his classroom time very engaging for his students. He and I team taught a class, and I knew that the plan was for me to teach the class on my own. Now he's a specialist in American politics with a really good background in political philosophy. I do international relations and comparative politics. So I didn't know that stuff. I needed to know it so I could teach it. And so there I was with my laptop, watching him lecture, and I found myself multiple times being distracted by email, right, or some random thing on the web. Right? Even with very high incentives to pay close attention, just the temptation, right, or just the immediacy of having the world, the world of the web at your fingertips, and right in front of you was too great for me to overcome, even though I know better. So I think that students having electronics in the classroom is just this incredible temptation for them. And honestly, I don't have good answers, but I hope that we do collectively today, and can work on it. Just a sort of something else I tell my students. This red gorilla test is super interesting. Pretty simple experiment, right? Simple interface. Letters moving around the screen. They sometimes bounce off the walls. You want them to count the bounces, similar to the gorilla experiment. But then this really big plus sign, bold red, moves through, traverses the screen. And most of the subjects saw it move. But when they were talking on their cell phones, 90% missed it. Right? So, very strong treatment effect, obviously. Yeah, don't drive while talking on the phone. And the point is, you're not special, right? So, driving is one thing, right? But in the classroom, right, even more so, right? Because what we're doing is much more complicated than driving. If they're not fully attending, it's going to be really hard for them to learn much. And then I try to tell them about the good news, right? So, and this is much more familiar to you than it is to me. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, this is life's work showing that one of the best things you can ever have as a human being is being fully attentive to something, right? He calls it flow. Super famous, right? There's, there's all the features, but he first started calling it optimal experience, and then switched it to flow for simplicity. And that's a lot of the subjects we're saying, we're describing. But yeah, it's optimal human experience requires your undivided attention. And so I try to teach my students that unless they can fully attend, they're going to miss out on a big piece of the joy of being human. Honestly, I don't know if it makes a difference, right? I mean, it's, this is an encouragement, setting, and I don't know if the encouragement's helping them much. So let's there's Kirk, and let's move into his ideas. He emphasizes this distraction problem, which we've described already. He also recommends that you go to Linda Stone's website, and it's really rich. I mean, she's one of the scholars that's focused the most on multitasking, and she's done lots of media appearances and writing for the media, and so there a lot of digestible material in there. She calls this continuous partial attention. And worries that it's not very good, right? The continuous partial attention is not the same thing, it doesn't add up in any of its partial parts, right? To attention. So, Kirk also talks about the other side, right? Which is there are benefits of having electronic media in the classroom as well, right? Think of the number of times where I'm fumbling, to remember some factoid, right? And the students can just pop it up, right? The Googlers among them can just, get it right really quickly. That's really a nice advantage. Sometimes you want to do stuff online in class, and automation is a really good thing. It's transformed the world. It's hard to prevent them from using that powerful tool, without thinking through the consequences. I'm a person, I type probably 5 times faster than I write in longhand. So my notes can be much more comprehensive if I'm typing them than if I'm writing them out. That's probably true for a lot of our students. Although the pretty good randomized control trials show that writing out notes longhand has a much better average treatment effect for student retention and learning than typing. So sometimes, I mean, I have friends. I have a friend at Wellesley College who just teaches her students that and says, "No electronics. You know, we're going to go with the best evidence we have about what's better for you." Actually, she might say, "Okay, you know, if you absolutely insist on typing, you know, then you got to sign this contract that you're only going to be typing notes and never looking at the internet or playing solitaire, and then you have to sit in the front of the classroom and do that, so I can monitor you better." I don't know. I mean, the other challenge with that, of course, is the cone of distraction, right? If one of them violates the contract, it's not just them that's affected. In the last session, when we did this in the morning, one of our participants said there's good research that shows that those that look at media during class are not only performing more poorly in the class, but also all those around them are too. There's a spillover effect, right? There's a contagion problem, which I think is a special, something we ought to pay special attention to. Yeah, and students with disabilities, some of them need software that run on computers and need it for that. Of course, that's probably a rare set of students that are like that, and you can probably make special accommodations for them. So some of Kirk's strategies: decide what you want to do, what your policy is, and then tell your students about it. Right? Discuss it with them. Include it on the syllabus. There's more on that in a minute. A nice point that he made is that, given this new technology, we're just now as a society figuring out what are the appropriate behaviors, right? What are the norms for how you behave with technology, and our job is in part to shape those norms and to teach those norms to our students, and so we need to actually embrace that role. Put it in the syllabus. Involve the students in a social contract. Many of them understand that this is a problem, right? And they know, like I know, that I'm going to be distracted, and so they may be very engaged in trying to figure out ways, like Ulysses and the Sirens, to tie their hands to the mast, so they're not tempted, right? To be distracted in the moment, in the down moments of the class. So, and then consequences. So I think in part because he's worried about the cone of distraction around the students that are playing solitaire or doing whatever, looking at websites. He recommends the laptops done in the back of the classroom. So I think he takes a more sort of free market approach to this. His colleague Joe Price was in the session in the morning and said, "Nope. In my class, no media, right? You write it out longhand. You can't even bring the notes to class that have been posted online, right? You're gonna rely on those and not actually take notes, right? And try to process it all. So I think there's different approaches to this. I actually don't know what the answer is. I'm an empiricist, and so I'm really tempted to do field experiments in the classrooms to try to figure it out. My wife's a professor of chemistry here, and we've been routinely doing field experiments in her classrooms, teaches 250 students at a time in organic chemistry, and we're learning some interesting stuff. Surprising to me, I mean, cognitive psychology, social psychology, and neuroscience have learned so much about how we learn. Well, what's shocking to me is how few really good studies have actually employed those lessons in practical curricula in the classroom, right? So it's surprising how few field experiments have been done with this mountain of knowledge about cognition and learning, and there's some of that's happening, but then you see more. If you're interested, I'm trying to build a team, here at BYU with these large classrooms with big subject pools. We could do some more of this, but I think this would be something that would be doing. Here's an example. I think this is one that Kirk uses, right? So he says, this is a good thing. You're encouraged, but you just really need to, not be distracted. Facebook, Twitter, those things. If you're caught, right, doing this. By the way, I'll try to send you, everybody that participates. I'll try to send you these slides. Then I'm just gonna kick you out of the class for the day. You're gonna lose participation points. I don't know if I have the guts to do that, right? Because I'm always worried about how they're feeling, and how mortified I would be to be in that situation. So again, this is part, what Larry was talking about earlier today about, what works for you, given who you are. I could have a conversation with them out of class, where I've noticed it's a problem and a persistent problem. I can signal them out and then have them come to my office and we can talk about it. But some people, that would be too intrusive too. So you'll decide. Yeah. So that's the next idea. Talk to them, engage them, and how you can solve the problem. You can program in class what times are okay for laptops or other media, and what times are not, so that it's not completely disallowed, but yet there are partitions in the classroom time. Yeah, just he recommends roaming, right? So you are checking. Some in the last session, said they put their TAs in the back and have them check, right? And track who's being distracted. So additional ideas, get feedback. What do they think? Right? If they buy in, it's going to be a lot easier to pursue a class policy. This is an interesting idea. Have a few students take notes that they share with everybody else. Right? That might work. If they want to, track things or record things, then they need to clear it ahead of time. That's it. So I wanted to spend the rest of the time pooling ideas, right? Sharing and offering possibilities. Yeah.
As you were talking, I appreciate this quite a bit. Thank you. As you were talking, a couple of items came to mind. The first was a class last semester. I just one day said, hey, brought up the different problems and temptations with having internet access in class, and can we just make an agreement that we won't do that during class? And everybody said yes. And
did they stick with it?
Well, so
that's
a
the
couple
story.
weeks later, there was a girl that I had been in my own to see about being an RA, and so after class I just walked up and I said, could you come up to my office during office hours? And by the time I got back to my office, this poor girl had written an email saying, I don't know if this is what it's about, but please, I'm so sorry for Rest Trace that I had browser windows open. I know we talked about it. And,
oh no. Did you still hire her as an RA?
No. But it wasn't because of this. But the other thing was, in graduate school, I TA'd different classes, 2 different classes separated by maybe 2 years in the same very large classroom with theater seating. And the first time I taught it, we used to do the TA trick. At some point in class, have a TA walk up and walk around, and you would see people. I mean, students would be on other, that have browser windows open and that sort of thing. But when they saw you start to walk up, they'd switch out. I think it was just 2 or 3, maybe 3 years later, same classroom, different class, and we would do the TA rounds, and they wouldn't even. They wouldn't even. This wasn't even a thing for them. So when you're talking about digital manners and so it was remarkable to me. Within 3 years, I watched that they'd stay on ESPN, and then the teacher would say something, they'd click open their Word document and write that down, and then go back to Facebook, and it didn't even faze them. They didn't even know. They didn't even think about. So I really do think first understanding the depth of this let's call it cultural phenomenon and then the real need, as you're saying, to discuss it and talk about it up front, because otherwise it will remain transparent to them. They'll just think that this is the way the world runs. And I was just blown away by the students, just not even, didn't think they were doing anything wrong.
Do any of those of you do a banning policy where you just ban media in the classroom?
Entirely.
So Michael does. We'll
No
talk.
cell phone, nothing.
Let's come back to that. So Kelly, and then.
Yeah, well, that's what I want to know, is if you have a total banning policy, are students resentful, or are they accepting? Are they, what's been the general reaction of among the BYU students if you?
They haven't, I mean, they resist verbally for about 5 minutes, and they realize you're not going to yield, they go along with it.
Does it show up in the teaching evaluations?
I have the highest in my department, so I don't think so.
Or in the student comments or anything?
Not that I've seen. I mean, they'll say stuff, I wish I could use my computer or whatever, but.
Michael, there may be confounds on the highest in your department, right? There may be other things causing that, right? So, despite your Nazi policy on
so
media.
I didn't used to have this. My first semester here at BYU, I've only taught graduate school before coming here, and so I was lecturing in this class, and this kid is just firing away on his computer, way faster than I'm talking. So I know he's not taking notes. So I stop the whole class and ask him what in the world he's doing, because other people are looking at him, and he's just almost blood red in his face, and somebody posted something about me on Facebook, and I've got to respond right now. I was like, take your computer and get out. Right? If you have to do this right now, do it somewhere else. And since that day, I've never allowed it back.
And then he said, now I'm going to post something about you.
That's right.
I expect
No,
that.
I guess, but I'm really serious. I mean, this is helpful, but what is the general disposition of BYU students toward this idea of banning?
A follow-up question, Michael. So their phones, you have them leave at the door?
No, if they answer a phone, they're kicked out. I said, unless your wife's pregnant and about to deliver a baby, you do not answer that
But
phone.
if they have their phones,
Airplane.
But they're not out.
you okay.
If their
When
phone
when
rings, they have to leave.
They complain about it for 5 minutes, but if they violate it, what do you do?
They have to leave. Yeah.
Throw their phone out the room.
No, I don't. I've never confiscated electronics. I've never done anything of that sort. But I will. If I tell them if your phone rings, you have to leave the class and you can come back tomorrow.
You can't come back.
You cannot come back until the next time we hold class. But again, I'm probably an extremist, as in many things in my life, probably.
Well, I don't know if this is a random sample, but it would seem that you might be on one of the tails, right? So.
We have a tech-savvy student over here that associates with a lot of peers. I was wondering what his thoughts were.
I happen to know that he has thoughts, and they're really good. So.
Well, I made a comment earlier this morning, so I don't want to monopolize the discussion or anything, but
They didn't hear it.
Yeah, we didn't hear it. Say it again.
So we were talking primarily earlier this morning about kind of some policing possibilities of how to go around and make sure people aren't on it. So really, the issue that I see among my generation is not necessarily the fact that we have phones out. It's the fact that we are at a university and we choose not to learn, and we don't have a desire to learn. And so, for me, there have been several classes at BYU that I kind of go in feeling like I don't want to learn anything from it because I have to take it. And so really, it's possible for me to not show up to class and to do the minimum and still get an A. And I've done that several times. And it's not because I don't like the professor or whatever, it's just it doesn't interest me. And so, and I have so many other things that I'm trying to juggle. I'm married, I'm working, I'm going to school, whatever, all these things. You guys live life, how busy it can get. And it's not because I don't like the professor, it's just the subject it's not relevant to me. But there's other things where it's outside my major, like I took a geology class last semester, and I'm a music major, but I was locked into geology the whole time, because I enjoyed it, like dinosaurs and stuff, that was cool, right? And so really it's, and I'm not going to put it on you guys, because I love, just, well, I love what you guys have been saying about how, just being transparent and talking to students about your expectations and stuff. And letting us know. If the policy, because Sister Hall and men's chorus, that's the same policy. If you get on your phone in the middle of rehearsal, that's unacceptable. And so you're out of men's chorus in general. It's not just the class for the day. You're kicked out of the ensemble because you're there to perform. And that's what you need to do. And so here...
See, there's somebody worse than me.
Well, that should be in all cases, but I think the biggest issue is The students need to be inspired to come and to perform and to learn and to be engaged and to participate and feel like they matter, because there's so many people at BYU, and sometimes I'm like, why am I even writing this paper? Chances are a TA is going to read it once, give me a grade, and then nobody is ever going to read it again. I'm probably never going to read it again. What am I doing for humanity? And so sometimes it feels like you're just doing stuff, and so that's oftentimes why we check out, is we feel like there's other things that we'd rather be doing to make a difference in the world, and sometimes we feel like we have to do the minimum. But there have been professors, Professor Ward, because I haven't taken a class from any of you guys, but Professor Ward is the only one that I've taken a class from, and that was freshman year, and he's the only one that I remember, aside from American Heritage. I enjoyed that one, but I think, are you Professor Patterson?
Yeah.
You're my American Heritage. Okay, so 2 in this department. You guys do a good job. But you guys are the ones that I remember from freshman year, and I can't tell you the other classes that I took freshman year. And so the stuff that I took from this department was interesting to me, and so I decided to pay attention, and I chose to do that. So if you can make it relevant, I don't know.
Please.
This goes right along with the comment I was going to make earlier. This sounds to me like a sad commentary on the fact that our classes are not engaging enough, that students are having this problem in the first place. Although I will admit that this seems to be much more of a problem in larger classes where there's this distance and this lack of connection and people are more easily distracted. The other thing that concerns me, and I'm kind of a relatively, rigid, rule-governed kind of person, but I've never had any desire to be engaged in law enforcement. And so I do have rules about this in my courses, which are, I admit, small courses. But most everything in my courses, the students are their own police officers, if you want to even call it that. So they decide whether or not they were being distracted and don't deserve credit for being there that day. I'm just concerned that we hear all these things about the mental health of our students and the stress levels and the depression and so on. I don't think it helps them for us to be policing them. I think they're mature enough to police themselves if we help them understand, which is what we're talking about as well, the importance of not being distracted and being focused. But your comment about putting it on us, I think we have to put it on ourselves and say, what is it about the way I'm teaching that is not engaging enough? That they're surfing the internet and watching ESPN instead of listening to what's happening here.
Yeah, those are very provocative points, and we should have this.
Ask yourself that. It's very uncomfortable. Some of the things on ESPN are really compelling. And sometimes I'd rather be home watching a tennis match or playing tennis myself. But that's when I have to ask myself, because it's for me. It's me too, right? Okay, am I having an enjoyable educational experience during this hour, or would I rather be doing something else? Yeah. So. Am I doing this in such a way that I'm good being here with them, and I feel like I'm learning something, and don't want to have my mind elsewhere on some screen?
Yeah, this is a hard challenge. I mean, many of us here are behavioral scientists, and we understand that people do things that they know aren't very good for them, right? They know better, right?
That's why
and
McDonald's exists.
What's
right?
that? Yeah. So I mean, so the question is, many of us also have libertarian sensibilities and don't want to impose, regimes on people that they wouldn't otherwise choose. And
I wonder about the legality of some of these things.
Yeah, these are great questions. I thought about buying a jammer that jams the internet signal. But that doesn't solve the problem because solitaire resides on the hard drive, so it doesn't solve my problem.
Get a little drone that flies around the room.
Yeah.
and photographs of students.
Oh, I was hoping we could shoot them. So.
You could shoot them. You could shoot them with darts. Take them up. You could photograph them and send them copies of it along with the sanction on their grade.
Bruce, you want to say what you said earlier today?
You could electrify the chairs that they're sitting in, and when they do it, the technology is wonderful. So you can electrify the chairs that they're sitting in, and when they violate one of these rules, they get a jolt. Welcome to the world of Michel Foucault.
Bruce, I mean, do you want to say what you were saying earlier?
We have a device that any of you can have, and I'll help you set it up. It takes 2 seconds to set it up. But it allows all the students to share their screens, and you can choose whose screen is being shown. So as you're lecturing, you may say, John, I want to show your screen. And you just click it on the tech podium, and his screen's up there on front. And, you know, that's one way of keeping their attention and making sure they're involved, that they're doing. You may want to ask who would like to share, but you could just say, share your screen, and you'll see all their Facebook and anything else that's up there.
So, I have to say, so that this appeals to my, my police nature, but offends my libertarian nature, right? And so, this is the real challenge. I would feel a lot better about using that if students had agreed to it ahead of time. Right? If they understand that they themselves are prone to distraction, but if they've chosen, that's okay, you can show my screen anytime, then they bought into that, and so this is part of the contract. What's that?
But by they, you mean?
No, I mean individuals. Yeah. So
how do you have class time for that?
Yeah,
I can barely get my material conveyed, let alone popping up people's screens or trying to police people.
Them share is what they were talking about earlier about this is your opportunity to teach and to express your understanding. So if you're going through a statistics problem, I can say, show us the way you solved it. Or how did you solve this economic problem?
So if you share Timmy's screen and there's porn on it, then what do you do?
that's a big problem. That's a big problem. My guess is they're not going to be able to access that from BYU, but that's my guess.
And they're not going to have it on there because there's their neighbors watching.
Yeah.
So was there anyone else who just outlaws tech?
Yeah, who are the banners? So Michael bans. Others of you who raised your hand and said that you ban electronics in your classroom.
I used to.
You used to.
But then I just got tired of them not doing it later. And but what I was going to say is I just have a kind of a simple philosophy about this. If I can't be part of the solution, I don't want to be part of the problem. What I see, my wife works in clinical research, and she works for a pretty big company here in Utah. She said the number one problem is new employees coming in and spending more time on their device, checking email, shopping, doing all sorts of things. This is where you're running clinical trials of drugs, and people's lives are at stake a lot of times if you don't follow the criteria. So I don't think that it's my problem. I mean, I can't compete as a teacher with much of the ESPN or anything else. I try to do the best job that I can, but I think we're working with a very entitled population here that if I teach 30 or 40-year-olds, they enjoy to be taught. But unfortunately, some of the present generation and present company not included over there.
But no, I agree with you.
But I just want to say, here it is. If you want it, fine. If you don't, I'm not going to get too stressed about it. But I'm just not going to get, rolled over in this whole issue. I try to keep it to a minimum. But I haven't kicked anybody out yet, but maybe that's on the horizon.
That was part of the primary point of that example of the 2-year, 3-year difference is to point out the difference in sensibility, that there could be students today that could be in the most engaging moment they're in, and you've got to be texting about it, or you've got to be, the sensibility is different. People are live tweeting their marriage proposals and these sorts of things. I mean, so if it is a change in sensibility,
then what do we do about that? Be even more engaged? I mean, that's my concern there.
Okay.
Sorry to talk so much. Maybe I'm overly idealistic, but that's been a problem all my life. I've really got to find ways to try to stick with the concept that I don't want to do anything to anyone else that I wouldn't want them to do to me, which may sound familiar. And I would want to do to them and to treat them the way I want them to treat me. So one of the things I try to do, and I admit I teach small classes, this is easier, I have taught large classes. So it's easy for me to say some of these things so I'm not dealing with 500 people. I teach them this is about respect. I think they understand what that is. I understand that there's different ideas about how you show respect to people. But I teach them that it's respectful, and not just to me, but to other members of our group. And that one of the primary characteristics that I want in our learning community is mutual respect. That I treat them with respect, and I expect that we will all treat each other with respect, and that this is disrespectful. I think when they get that, they don't always get it, not everyone gets it, but when they get that, then this takes care of itself. I mean, if you connect the two. Without that, of course, you got a million and one things you're trying to
I agree.
find ways to control.
I think it does. I was going to say, I think our best friend is social control. So when there has been an agreement made and everybody is conscientious of this, and this is the atmosphere of this classroom each time we meet here, you know how you feel when you go to a conference session and your phone goes off? You know, you forgot to turn your phone off, or it's mortifying. You're totally embarrassed. You get up and you leave the session. How could I forgot to turn this off? And I think that is, so it's not a 1-on-30 situation or something like that, but that there is a general understanding that this is what we're doing in this class, and other things don't fly.
And hopefully it's come from the inside of that self-control.
I don't think it could be otherwise. I mean, that's what I mean. There's a consensus. There's an idea of what it is that we're doing here.
Joyce?
It's perfect.
I'm curious as to those who don't ban them. One of the things that's very frustrating to me is everybody around them gets distracted. If it were just the one person's loss, because they're on the technology, that's their loss, but people around them get distracted. And then the other thing that happens in class often is that somebody will ask a question, you go into good detail, you explain it, and 30 seconds later somebody on their mechanics asks the identical question. And you know, I mean, I'm always kind and respectful, but how do you, those of you who don't ban it, how do you deal with those kinds of, you know, how do you deal with the impact, like secondhand smoke? How are you dealing with that?
I mean, that is a big challenge, right? So this cone of distraction. So in the last session, Jessica Scott raised research that she had read. Let me see. Sana, Weston, and Capata, March 2013 article in Computers in Education, Computer Use. The title is something like this. It's not this. This is not the verbatim title. Computer use decreases learning for users and for nearby students. So students that are being distracted by the people next to them, are also being harmed by by that distraction. So. That's probably a good reason, right? So, I'm not a political philosopher, although I hang out with them sometimes. But my sense is that your rights stop when you start harming others, right? And so that's something that I don't know that we've fully internalized yet, and which is why I'm actually, in part, because of these sessions today, I'm thinking about a ban, right? But one in which they buy in, right? I guess I wouldn't, if they don't sign the form, I guess I'd try to figure something else out for them to do, and work through it on individual bases. But because I just think that it sounds like the harm is so much greater than the benefit, but I don't know. Yeah.
I'm curious if anybody is going the other direction and thought of ways to incorporate devices into teaching more. That whether Twitter, I've heard of faculty, people lecturing that have some sort of, I don't even know how you do all this, but some sort of Twitter thing where the people can send tweets during class, so it shows up.
Projected and running.
Yeah, and then
Yeah,
they'll
I've
have
seen
their
that.
TAs will be reading those, and they'll pull out questions that are particularly insightful and thoughtful. Because if students are in this world, if this is what their world and their life is, then one way to approach it, rather than saying you can't go there at all, is to say I'm going to come in there with you, right?
And roll with it.
Yeah,
roll with
I'm
it.
curious if anybody's had any.
Well, there's a lot of those going on in history. I can't remember the professor's name. He used digital dialogue. And so he'd be lecturing. It's a large group.
Oh, during lecturing. Oh,
yeah. And he had his TAs reading them and then combining the questions and then giving them to him. So he was able to answer more questions than trying to look for hands.
Yeah, and you get people that wouldn't maybe talk
right.
up in class that would.
That's interesting.
Eye clickers. I've used it when I've taught to get questions going. I give them a question that's not just a yes or no, but how do you really feel? And people can answer how they really feel instead of raising their hands. And that can get a discussion going. You can use it for saying, here's the right answer. And then those who didn't, let's talk about it within your group so you can learn the right answer, how we got to it, and then do the real quiz that counts. You can do lecture capture, so students don't focus on taking notes, they just listen to you and then they can go back to the lecture and review it for their notes. So there's a lot of things we're doing on campus that we can use in class. Dr. Brown's done a lot with the lecture capture and with the camera. Students just recording their own lectures.
Yeah, that's a very different approach. It might be the right one. I don't know, right? Which is you roll with it, right? You go in whole hog, and I don't know. Maybe that's the future.
We're categorizing something that may not be a single category. So the question is, we incorporate these digital methods, and they're like, but I need to check Facebook, or I need to see what the score is, or this is not necessarily a silver bullet solution, because the real issue is distraction.
Yeah, and there's where my own experience is probably driving my my thoughts here, is that I've had high incentives to be attentive and to pay give all of my concentration to something, and I've still been distracted, even though I know better.
Well,
right.
Elder Oaks has talked about several times in conference about using electronics during sacrament meetings.
Yeah.
You're distracting others. And he's told them, don't use them. You're here for another purpose.
You saw the face-to-face thing with Elder Bednar and his wife. He was
Yeah.
ready to put that thing away in church.
Yeah.
But see, at the same time, they had questions coming in.
Exactly.
Right, and answer them in real
in real time.
But it's using the technology for the right purpose and the right time. So it's an education. We got to teach you how to use this right. It's not just your free will. Because when I had guest lecturers come to my class, I told everyone, you never open your notebook unless you ask for permission to take notes.
Interesting.
Because I didn't want the guest lecturer to even feel like someone didn't care.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, and back to your comment about respect. I'm a huge respect fanatic. And we would actually, even in my classes, kind of role play a discussion and then have somebody come in and interrupt. And the person literally turn their back and talk, and leave the person they were talking to this way. And then we chatted about, when you pull out your device and somebody's making a comment and you pull this out because they've raised their hand to make a comment, and you go, oh, the teacher's not talking now. You're doing the same thing. You're turning your back on them, and what they're saying is not important. And that's disrespectful. You cannot be disrespectful. And we chat a lot about respect, respect each other as human beings.
Does it make a difference for them? Can you tell?
Absolutely. They get respect because they want to be respected.
I think they don't necessarily understand. I'm a therapist and I've worked with adolescents for years and years. They don't understand what is disrespectful when it comes to devices. So they might appreciate the concept of respect, but they don't get the pulling out their device when someone else is talking.
That's the same thing. I point
right,
out
and I
that's
think
the same thing.
some of that.
Time and a place, this isn't the time.
And we turn around and go back to them and we point that out and say, this is what you're doing. This is what they see. This is what they perceive. and it's disrespectful.
That's a great point.
You cannot do that. And it helped. It helped a lot because they don't want to be disrespected.
Teaching them what it looks like,
what it looks
as
like.
opposed to just saying.
But I think that's a socialization thing, right? So I mean, you'll see it, they'll do it all the time with their friends, and they don't see it as disrespect, and their friends don't see it as disrespect. So it's kind of like when I was in college, and I had this professor, Milton Rosenberg, who's a really old guy, social psych guy, and he insisted that nobody would wear hats in class because he saw that as disrespectful. So, you know, I mean, so part of it, you can socialize them in your class, but I mean, it's interesting because it still doesn't speak to that other issue of they go to work somewhere, right, and then they're not disrespecting anybody when they're, you know, supposed to be running some experiment on something or whatever, and they're sitting there buying something on eBay, right? So I do feel like there might be more there in terms of, you know, just the respect thing. That may only be in your classes, or, you know, people that are not, you know, I imagine that, I know Richard is older than the average student by a couple of years. So are not of their same age, but you know what I'm saying. So there are different norms of respect, and understanding that, and then, you know, trying to get at what's the real issue there. I think.
You know, but it does still, even in the workplace, and sometimes you have to point it out. I mean, the one time, and I almost had an aneurysm over this. I'd taken my kids swimming. There was the lifeguard on the stand.
Oh yeah.
Not watching the pool.
Yeah.
That hit me wrong in so many ways I can't even tell you. They have to be taught there's a time and a place.
The drowners were texting me.
Drowners.
The drowners were texting me. Please help me.
Bottom of the pool.
Push the button on your...
Did you have something?
There's no service down here.
Basically, it's the same things. We're caught in the dilemma of trying to use digital media to advance learning. And so if we're going to allow them in the classrooms, we need to find activities where it actually contributes to the learning outcome. Because if it doesn't, then it's a distraction and it's not useful or helpful. So it's that time and the place. If you're going to have a specific day when you do something digitally, you just set up the ground rules, you have the activity, and it works out fairly well because they can bring their devices and they can participate in learning that way. But if it's the unique experience or 1 out of 30, it makes a bigger impact on them rather than just having it available all the time.
Yeah. So are others of you leaning towards the ban policy? Yeah. I mean, what are you thinking about? What's persuading you?
I think trying to, I have it in my syllabus that to discourage it, and I kind of discourage it and drown on it, but there's no really consequences, and kind of having a discussion and then saying, and then trying to police it. I mean, having your TAs police it seems like an enforcement nightmare. So I'd rather have a quick discussion at the very beginning and say, try to get them on board and say, this is what we're going to do. I don't know what I'll do in the winter when I teach 202, which is 150 students. That's a different story. But I think I might try it in there. I think I'll try it in my smaller classes this fall. I mean, I'm a historian, so I'm not going to be doing digital dialogue or having them, try to incorporate technology in the classroom itself. I mean, sometimes it's nice when people can look up some factoid or something, but that's few and far between. I think I'd like to try it out to see how it goes.
Yeah, that's.
And I'm curious, Michael. You have a quick discussion. You try to get them on board, and then say this is what's going to happen.
So we use learning as the motivator.
Yeah.
I just say, if you'll give me your heart and mind for an hour and 15 minutes twice a week for this semester, I guarantee you will learn a substantial amount of information about urban planning, about how cities work. If that's not your goal, this is not the class for you. And because my classes aren't required except for urban planning majors, they generally agree to it. I mean, they're there because they want to learn my discipline. If they don't want to learn my discipline, there's other professors that can entertain them, right? That's what you guys are here for.
Ouch.
That was a joke. Like there's no teacher evaluations for this room.
They apologize. Devices.
Apologize.
It's just the note taking on the computer. That's my. What if they work best off of it?
Yeah, what
People
if they
have
do?
asked that. So I have all my slides available beforehand, and they can ask them to be printed out for them, or they can print them out themselves, and they come having all the notes ahead of time. So my classes are, all the tests are open note, open book, and 80% of all the test questions come from the notes in the book. So the class time that we have is not to cover basic, drawn-out material that they're going to be asked true, false, multiple choice, short answer questions on. The getting from the C+ to the A, then in the class, is really about the dialogue, the information that we learn in addition to that as we go through the notes in the classroom. So they can't bring, this is part of the selling point. You can't bring your computer to the exam, but you can bring your notes to the exam. So if you've printed off all my slides and you've added notes in the margins on all the slides, you can bring that to the exam. But your computer is not welcome.
That's a good method to try. Take notes and...
Yeah.
I think we're not so far apart as may have sounded earlier, because
I never thought we were.
What I hear at the beginning of what you're saying is you're describing to them the type of learning community that you're inviting them to join.
Sure.
And the conditions under which they're going to join it, which include we're doing something of value here, of value to you, of value to society, and we're going to be serious about it. We're going to be focused as we do this. And I think that principle applies whether or not, we decide or not decide to ban these devices. Or
this is a great example here, by the way.
Or how we use them. I think then you do have to...
I just got a new phone, I didn't know that's what it sounded like.
Out tomorrow. Strike her name from the participation.
Out.
I'm being distracted, sir. Can you repeat?
That's how awful those students are.
There's something right. I think then you have them on board.
Sure.
The thing that I'm concerned about, I've had a couple of horrible experiences. I guess if you teach long enough, you have a few here and there. I have rules about coming on time because I'm obsessive about coming on time. I get to class 15 minutes early, 20. And I talk to students outside of class, so it really helps. So I have these rules. You have to be on time. I have rules of decorum in my course program that I call it. It's like 2 pages of how we respect each other, the devices, that's where the device guidelines are and so on. Coming on time is one of them. They check themselves off on this stuff. So if you're not on time and if you violate the rules of decorum, if you were surfing the internet, you don't get credit for being there that day. But I tried for a while banning people from class if they didn't come on time. So if the bell had already rung and someone tried to come in the door, I told them they couldn't come in. And you can see what this is headed towards. I got into a real confrontation with a young woman who insisted she was coming in, and I couldn't ban her from the class. And this is going down in front of the whole class, right? Okay? And I'm trying to stay under control here. I didn't, lose control or start yelling or anything. But it was this real power struggle, which I'm not really big on power struggles. And so it was her and me. I left. I decided, okay, you insist on staying, then I'm leaving, which is kind of extreme, I guess. Okay. I'm out of here. So I left. This went to my party chair, of course. She had a conversation with him, and then I had a conversation with her. We forgave each other. In fact, I ran into her at a wedding reception that had, where you sit at the little table for a minute. She came and sat by me, and we chatted. It was all made right. But after that, I was like, is this really what I want to have happen? I didn't dream in a million years that this would, explode into this mess. I'm like, I don't want to be on the police force. So I still have the rule. okay? And I still teach them this is respect. You don't come in and disrupt in the middle of class. We've already started. So I teach them, come on time or come next time. Being late is lame. I have my little sayings. But they're governing themselves because I don't really want to get into this thing where, you know, I got a court case to manage. So again, that's what I really like about what you're saying, because, you know, in a way, you know, you have your regulations and you're enforcing. But it starts with you're creating this learning community. Come and join me with what we're doing that's of value, and we're going to be focused by not having these devices. See, that puts it in a frame.
And I should add, in 10 years of teaching, I've never had to kick somebody out of class.
Okay, well, I'll introduce you to this student.
I had a student once try to punch me after class, but I've never had a student.
Wow.
She has graduated now, and I actually had another episode last year where a student nearly assaulted me. He wasn't even in my class.
Yeah.
Because
I think they're pretty good overall, honestly.
Yeah, no, our students are terrific this way.
Try to cooperate and get along
Yeah.
with the rules of the class.
Yeah, I've never had
The
to
student
point
just
anybody out.
impromptu yesterday said, do I have permission to look this up on Google so that, you know, I said, no, let's not do that. And I mean, I haven't laid that out as, you know, ask permission first, but I think they're pretty good if you give them.
Yeah.
Oh, they're wonderful.
Give them
What I'm getting at
parameters.
is when you escalate
Oh, yeah.
the enforcement level of this thing, and all of a sudden, you know, you're asking for
I
something
couldn't agree more, yeah.
you never really
Yeah.
dreamed could happen at BYU. So, I'm still working.
I can't believe you walked out of class.
I'm thinking there might be also another hybrid kind of thing where, like, towards the end of the semester, I do some things with teaming where computers are really valuable in that setting, and maybe identifying on the course outline on the days that are marked, such and so, please bring them, they're welcome, we'll be using them, we invite them, we like them, kind of thing. On these other days, please do not, we won't need them, it's not useful in the class, and so we invite you not to. And at least that demonstrates to a respect for the value that it can have in certain kinds of class activities.
And we do the same. So in my methods class, when we're doing our projection models and forecasting models and things, they've got to have a computer and they have to have Excel on it. Otherwise, there's no reason to come. And so there are certain days in which, yeah, you're not only asked, but you either have one or you're teaming with somebody that has one on that day.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.